point is that every single day, whether it's obstruction of having people come to the table with facts, ignoring subpoenas and the rest, every single day, the president is making a case. He's becoming self-impeachable in terms of some of the things that he is doing.
Welcome back to Morning Joe. It is Thursday, May 9th. With us, we have White House reporter for the Associated Press, Jonathan Lemire, former U.S. Senator, now an NBC News and MSNBC political analyst, Claire McCaskill, former White House counsel to President Obama, Bob Bauer. Good to have you guys on board, along with Willie, Joe, and me. Boy, Nancy Pelosi.
Nancy Pelosi. I'll tell you what, I've been friends with Nancy for a very long time, and
watched her for a long time.
We were on different sides of the aisle. Got to say, Claire, I knew she was good at what she did, but and this isn't hyperbole. I don't think I can recall a leader on Capitol Hill being more pitch perfect. Yeah. Juggling more things at the same time than Nancy Pelosi, but she has struck the perfect tone from the start.
I think she is, this is one of those times when experience does really matter. And, in politics, experience is a bad thing. You're supposed to have never done it before.
Right.
You're supposed to be, some business guy who just wandered in and said, well, I can save America, But Nancy has been there. She understands. And what's really remarkable, Joe, is not just how pitch perfect she's been, how she's managed to keep the troops from fraying.
Right.
And that's hard. Once you get power, once you've got that gavel, you want to go. And she's managed to keep all of her men and women together as a team. That's a remarkable accomplishment, especially when we've got that left-center kind of friction in our party right now.
Well, and for you, this has to seem especially extraordinary because Nancy is Speaker of the House because of the moderates that won in Virginia, because of the moderates that won in California, because of the moderates that won in Georgia, because of the moderates won in Texas, because of the moderates that won in districts where they don't usually win. And I hear liberals complaining all the time about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is, and Nancy is charting a moderate course to try to help people like you running for office so the Democrats can get the majority again. But until Democrats figure out how to do this on the Senate side, well, Republicans are going to keep putting conservatives on the Supreme Court for as long as Republicans control the Senate. Doesn't matter who the Democratic president is. We saw that with Merrick Garland.
Well, I think you're right, and I think we've got to recruit good candidates in the states we can win, and there's a bunch of states we can win. I do think that the Democrats in the Senate are trying. If you notice this week, what most of the Democratic senators are talking about is health care for women in this country. I mean, we are taking a dramatic, radical turn to the right in terms of some health care issues for women. Accessibility just to contraceptions, is actually in play under this administration. So I think the Senate is trying. I do think that what Nancy has in the back of her mind and what Chuck Schumer has in the back of his mind is the way we get back to a majority, both having the White House and the Senate, is getting those Obama voters that we lost to Donald Trump.
So can I bring up, I don't want to get you in trouble.
You probably will.
Oh, that's...
I've never been in trouble before, so why don't we try it?
You are fine, although he will try.
So there's a reason why Donald Trump, when he goes to the rallies, he ticks off this, that, the other, that. And part of that is late-term abortion. And that matters to a lot of voters across America. I always say it's like the assault-style weapons. 85% of Americans oppose our background checks. 85-90% of Americans, they want expanded background checks, but the Republicans take the other stand. On late-term abortion, it's the same thing. And in states like Missouri, in states like Montana, in other states in middle America where Democrats need to win if they want to control the Supreme Court again, sometimes it's got to be okay to have a Democratic nominee that believes that when a baby is viable, when an unborn child is viable, like 22, 23 weeks, it's okay for states to put in limitations. Again, I'm not preaching anything here. I'm just talking about political realities. There are some issues that Democrats have to give some room on, like abortion, and not take an absolutist position if they ever want to win back the Senate.
Well, most Americans don't have an absolutist position on abortion.
Right.
But first of all, Donald Trump is lying when he talks about late-term abortion in his rallies.
Yeah, the way he talks
Nobody
about
is
it, he lies.
Live-born babies.
But let's not get into.
I understand.
Let's not get into a semantics argument that people who want, semi-auto or that want military-style weapons out there get on guns. On abortion, there have been Democrats that have staken out a position that precludes people from getting elected in Missouri and other states where Democrats have to win.
I think what Democrats have to do is they have to pivot and go to the where there is most agreement, like background checks. You know where there's most agreement? Accessibility to contraception.
Right.
Women, there are going to be more unwanted pregnancies if they don't have contraception.
Right.
Defunding organizations that are the go-to organizations for contraception are going to create more abortions.
I understand.
The other thing is, what Georgia just did, is they're saying that a woman should go to prison and a doctor should go to prison if there's a heartbeat.
Okay, well, so see,
that's 6 weeks.
So there is.
Women many times don't even know they're pregnant
So there's
at
the
6
extreme,
weeks.
there's the extreme position on the other side.
Exactly.
I'm just saying Democrats have to allow somebody to say, you know what, I support
I couldn't agree with
the
you
right
more.
for abortion, but at 20 weeks, 21 weeks, when the baby becomes viable, I'm sorry. You know what? I think at that point a state can make its own choices without the federal government stepping in. And I'm saying the Democratic Party has to be okay with that. Again, I'm just talking.
Well, first of all, the
about
Democratic Party needs to welcome people that have all views.
Right.
I mean, that's the bottom line, is that we should not be disqualifying people as Democrats because they are big gun advocates or because they are very
Pro-life,
strong. Yeah. And that's the other thing we got to remember is let's make sure we don't start eliminating people because on one or two or three issues we aren't in perfect sync.
And just to put a point on that topic, you know where else third-term abortion, third trimester abortion is unpopular? Among Democrats. If you look at the most recent polling, it's in the teens for approval of third trimester abortion. So I think you're right that is an extreme position. That then we go on the other side in Georgia and you see the extreme position.
You see it there,
you have to have a place for pro-life Democrats.
You see it in Alabama.
Yeah.
I mean, people are staking out extreme positions that are going to hurt people on both sides. Good luck. I mean, being a Republican candidate, ever winning in Georgia, a suburban, a suburban woman.
So before we get to Bob, Claire has confirmed that subpoenaing is a word.
It's an official word.
It is. Not
good at it. So
yeah, we are subpoenaing business records.
No, it doesn't sound right.
It is. It's an awkward word.
No, we're not doing it.
Why don't you just say,
the
I'm
Senate
going to
Intelligence
subpoena
Committee
your
has
business
subpoenaed.
records. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.